Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are exploring the Phaedo, and in doing so, we are engaged in a fantastic, magical, spiritual, philosophical, life-changing discussion with Socrates. Socrates left on his deathbed, the last day that he was alive before he was murdered for being a philosopher. He left us not only his doctrine of what exactly philosophy is, but a warning about what's to come. People claiming to be wise by rejecting the very things that make philosophy philosophy, and outlining to us the significance of not falling into that trap and doing real philosophy at all times. The significance for our soul, for our reincarnation, for our human race, but primarily for you, to reach the goal that you actually really seek most of all, the goal that all other things are a kind of distraction from, or some sort of intermediary step in between. You seek beauty in one thing, well, what you really seek is beauty itself. Maybe you think you're not good enough and you have to do this certain thing first before you can get into that which you really want. But ultimately, all activities, the saying is all roads lead to Rome, but it's the opposite. All roads lead to Greece. So this is the thing we need to do. Find philosophy, distinguish it from what it isn't, and do that. Because not only is it what you really seek and what we are here to do, but it's our destiny. It's our ultimate purpose. And if we don't do it, we will see the consequences, live out the consequences of all of the human ills, all of the division, all of the wars, fighting, conflict, and experience as we are doing mass injustice. But Socrates said, hey, this is important, but you can't just believe me. You have to learn this art for yourself, which is important because he's defining it as an art. What does art mean? Well, if we define it according to the non-philosophers, the things that Socrates told us to be on a lookout for, people who have what he calls the worst defect of the soul, the greatest defect of the soul, that is, they reject the logos, a universal, understandable, sound and true pattern of understanding open to all and reflecting through all levels of reality. They reject the level of being. They will say that you can't know anything beyond the physical world, or maybe that there isn't even anything beyond the physical world, balloons. And they'll reject the art. How to use your mastery of the logos and your apprehension of the realm of pure being, truth, artfully. So we can't look to those people who claim to be philosophers or claim to be knowers or claim to be experts, claim to have wisdom, and they are the ones who actually understand. Socrates says, don't look to them for explanations about what philosophy is and how to live. You have to develop the art yourself. And therefore, I have to pass on, says Socrates, that which allows you to pick up the art. Equally so, we can't look to those people to define what art is, because they will say, well, there is no art, really. It's just all a matter of opinion. Or art is in the eye of the beholder. Or art is a mechanism through which extremely wealthy people launder their money so they can continue their injustice and exploitation of humanity and our planet. Kind of like the way a lot of art is done today. Why can't they define art? Without understanding, without the logos, what are you left with? Opinion. Without the realm of being as truth, the standard of truth, the paradigm through which all creation unfolds, the cause of the way things are, without that model or paradigm, what are you left with? Appearances. opinions and appearances. No standard. Anything goes. You want to call yourself a doctor? Who cares? There's no standard for medicine. Anyone's a doctor. Yeah, go nuts. Grab a drill and start boring into somebody's head and call it surgery. Why not? Well, without understanding, without the paradigm, without the logos, without being, or in terms of cognitive functions, the way we apprehend the logos, dianoia, a word we can't accept understanding for because the way we use it is incorrect. Well, it's not appropriate for philosophy, at least, because the word understanding has been bastardized because they reject the logos. So understanding ain't understanding. We need to bring in the Greek word dianoia, which specifically means the logos and specifically means an understanding of being. So what's the cognitive function? What's the function that we can access within our own selves to apprehend the realm of being? Nous. How is it translated nowadays in a culture that doesn't have being and doesn't have the logos? Knowledge. So in other words, what we call knowledge must be related to opinions and physical experience, not knowledge of the absolute paradigm. So hey, I've had experience in the physical world, therefore I've had real world knowledge. I've got real world knowledge, experience. And maybe I understand the kind of paradigm of one thing. Maybe I know how engines work, so I can say I've got knowledge of engineering maybe, or the knowledge of a mechanic. But this is not true knowledge, or lacks the true knowledge. Therefore, without the logos, and our way of apprehending it, dianoia, without the realm of being, and the way of apprehending it, nous, we cannot have art, which is using those two things in order to benefit the subject, not benefit the practitioner. The doctor doesn't use his art of medicine to make him rich. That's called corruption. Equally so, politicians shouldn't be using their job to make them rich or their friends rich. No. That's corruption. So we have a definition of art, therefore, without those building blocks. Oh, and by the way, for something to be beneficial, there needs to be a paradigm of what is good. So how do you know the good? Again, you have to recognize it or know it in the realm of being through nous, and you have to understand it too with dianoia of the logos. Same thing. So you can't have benefit, you can't have art. You don't have being or nous, you can't have art. You don't have logos and dianoia, you can't have art. Therefore, this one of the big puzzles of our age is, what exactly is art? Is anything art? Is spaghetti thrown at a wall art? Well, of course they can't answer that, so it goes around in circles because they miss the three fundamental elements that make an art an art. Now, we may be able to start the quest for seeking what true art is by looking at things that we recognize as artful, like the art of medicine, or even the art of engineering, or the art of being a mechanic, and realize, well, hang on a second, there has to be an understanding, there has to be a paradigm of excellence. And then that same knowledge of the excellence will allow you to recognize the deviations or the problems. And that has to be used to benefit the subject. In other words, we have to go from looking at examples in our physical world that we see through the senses, in the realm of becoming, in growth and change, growth and decay, moving back and forth, that we can gain opinions of. That learning has to transition into the paradigm itself. What is the ideal? If these are necessary for the art of medicine, the art of engineering, the art of mechanics, what then is the cause of those many different things having those elements? What causes that principle to be a principle for the many, for the universals? In other words, the many to the one. How do we move from the many to the one? How do we go from the particulars to the honorific? How do we go from the sense world to the realm of being? The third dimension to the fourth dimension, we could say. There are many ways of explaining that jump, and we have many because we've been developing triads in our learning. We're looking for key terms and arranging the patterns. So the first term, the activity to the power. How do you get from the particulars to the honorific? How do you get from becoming to being? How do you get from the third dimension to the fourth dimension? We have many ways of explaining that jump because of our learning, because of dianoia, because we are engaged in the art of reading, which means we have to play too. We have to engage our mind. We have to develop our understanding. So that's where we are in history, by the way. We might be able to recognize individual arts, but we have to make the jump to, well, okay, what's the cause of that? What causes us to have individual arts? So we can make that jump. And without that, we can't really answer what is art in terms of, painting and music and those sorts of things that we call the arts. What makes them art? Well, we can't answer that because we have not yet made that jump. And Socrates is saying, the reason why is unless you learn the true art, which would be that primary or paradigmatic art that we're looking for, then you will get knocked off your course. If there is a path called the logos, you'll get knocked off you'll get distracted or knocked off course. You might even go to distrust humanity or the logos itself by people who reject those very things. They will say they are the most wise and they are the most understanding because they themselves recognize, balloons, that there is no logos, there is no being, and there is no art. Therefore, if we learn from these people, we can't answer that question. What is art? There is none. Anything. Yeah. Throw spaghetti at a wall. Nail a banana to a canvas and call it art. Why not? So now we're seeing why we can't answer certain big questions. And of course, if this is a standard or a paradigm, we can say, well, maybe this is also why we can't address other key questions or solve other problems. Answer those questions like, why is there corruption? Why is there tyranny? Why are fascists ruling most of the world? Why is the political system a farce run behind the scenes by, whoever the hell, corporate billionaires, a small group of families, profiteering from war and exploitation? Why are none of the news networks telling the truth? Why are we doing the exact opposite of everything that is good in most areas of our society? And if these problems are understandable and solvable, why the heck are we not solving them? Let's try it. Can we reject the solving of them by saying there is no model for true rulership, there is no model for justice, there is no model for the good? So who knows what's good for society? Is that what the experts claim? Yes. Yeah. Hey, that's how come they sneak in religion, because the people who want to exploit people, so get them to act against their own interests. It's a well-known fact that when they realize that they're not going to be very popular, saying, hey, we're going to exploit you and take everything and enslave you, they started appealing to religious people, who are a group already primed not to understand, already told you can't know the nature of God until you die if you're good. You can't understand, you can only have belief. Therefore, you can't master the art of your own excellence yourself. You have to obey the priests and the clergy and the Pope and all that sort of thing. They're already primed to reject those things, and so they started saying, hey, we're against abortion, right? Isn't that what you guys are into? The Republicans weren't against abortion back in the day. They started to lie to appeal to people who were more easily misled so they would have a base, and so on. It's a farce. And so what do they say? You can't know God. And what do the politicians say? You can't know the excellence of. There is no standard that we need to be held to. And anyone who wants to ask questions, we should silence them. Whistleblowers, or they'll call them. Okay, and what else do they say? Okay, they've rejected being. They've rejected the standard or paradigm. Logos. Do they reject an understandability? Do they say, oh, you can't understand? You're not a special person from a private school and a special club like me who understands economy, who understands the political, why we need war. Not only that, there is no understanding itself, therefore we should vote based on our personal opinions and belief. Just like the way we elect doctors. The most charismatic and manipulative doctors who can convince everybody, change their opinions and beliefs that they should be a doctor, that's who we give medical licenses to, right? There's no understanding involved. Oh no, wait, we don't allow that for doctors. And many other arts. Justice, politics, spirituality, religion, even though religion is itself based on belief. So it needs to go, needs to be upgraded. So is that one of the things they reject? Not just the paradigm, but the understanding? Saying we need to have belief? Yes. And therefore, do they say that there's any art that they need to demonstrate that they're using understanding against a paradigm to specifically benefit the people, bring them closer to the good, and purify themselves from their illness? Is that standard of art that can be demonstrated with proof? Is that a standard to which politicians are held? Absolutely not. Not at all. No logos, no standard, no logos, no paradigm, and no art. So we're really seeing the significance of what Socrates is saying. You need to learn the art. This is what happens if you don't. In fact, we need to exercise ourselves by saying, side A of our dialectic, what can you say about the art? If it is, how does it function? How does it relate to others, other groups, other divisions? And how can we unify that into a greater understanding of the definition? That's the dialectic. But also side B, what if we don't have the art of the logos? Socrates is giving us the pieces to fill out that side of our dialectic too. War, division, corruption, people claiming to be experts by rejecting the logos, rejecting being, rejecting the art. What else do? They train people to hate either humans, because we're not learning the art to judge who is trustworthy or not, and hate the logos, the worst condition of the worst defect of the soul. Well, yeah, I hate understanding. I hate philosophy. Because I go to learn philosophy and it's all academics gatekeeping or bombarding me with big words or telling me I have to recall all these opinions from all these people who are missing the mark. But I don't know why they're missing the mark, because we're not being taught the logos. Hate the logos. Yeah, a lot of people get into psychology and philosophy. Psychology, the healing of or the purification of our ignorance. Philosophy, the climbing up. Of course, both are the same art. They get very disheartened after their first year. Almost universally, because we're not learning the art. It's just torturing rats and coming up with opinions and based on some guy. Why do we care about his opinions? Who knows? Are any of these opinions verified? Nope. Can't. There's no art. Same thing with politics. We hate politics for the same reason. There's no art. There's no standard. Same thing with religion. Of course we can allow a million different harmful beliefs to individuals and to the planet. Manipulation of people. Famously, how many religious authorities have, been engaged in this or that scandal? Billionaires exploiting the money of their followers. We can let them do that. There's nothing wrong with that, because there's no such thing as right and wrong. And if they can find a section in their book, say, oh, well, Jesus actually said that money is good, then, yeah, who cares? So what happens? We hate the logos. We hate the understanding. So what do we say? Around the dinner table, no talk of politics or religion. No talk of the two most important areas of our life, how we should run society and how we should organize our soul in relation to our purpose and the divine. No talking at the table about what's meaningful. Why? We've been trained to hate the logos because the people claiming to be experts have let us down time and time again. Socrates gave us the blueprint. He said, this will happen. How did he know that in our world, no talking about politics or religion at the dinner table? How did he know? How could he predict the internet filled with racism and right-wing propaganda, fascist content? How did he predict that all of the social media, all of the politics and media is controlled by a small group of people claiming to be experts, saying the same thing, teaching people to hate the logos? How did he know? He said he had the art of prophecy from or maybe it's not the art of prophecy. Maybe it's simply, if you know the pattern, you can see how it unfolds. It's obvious. Right? If you know basketball, let's say, football, I think football's more popular. If you know football, if you know that one team is a bunch of 4-year-olds and one team has Messi in it, you know what's going to happen. Messi will dribble around the 4-year-olds and score some goals, and then after that's going to happen, and they're going to get crushed. Because you know Messi, because you know how football works. Yeah, it's too easy. Anyone can recognize that. But so if there's more nuance, if you recognize, oh, okay, I know the Manchester City team. I know how they play. I understand it. I can see the paradigm. I know the coach. I know how he thinks. I know the model the coach uses. I know the parts that he uses within his model, their strengths and weaknesses. I know Arsenal. I know their paradigm. I know their parts, their players, their strengths and weaknesses. Therefore, I can predict kind of how the game's going to play out. Only we're looking at something more universal and more meaningful than that. Isn't that amazing? The vision of the man. A vision we can all have if he's able to pass on the art of the logos to us. That's what we're doing. So our question today was, well, how do we get there? How do we go from these people, the realm of opinion, the realm of our physical senses, to the realm of the logos, being, and the art? How do we make that jump? Because it is a jump. Fundamental paradigm shift to a realm where there is a paradigm, from no paradigm to that paradigm. How do we make that jump when everyone around us is saying there is no logos, it's just opinions, there is no realm of being, it's just the physical world, get rich and get famous and who cares? There's no consequence to your injustice and to your soul in this, the way you live in this world. And there's no art that we should subject spiritual teachers, political teachers, people in the justice realm, people in the education realm. There's no art that you need to subject them to. There's no actual benefit. You can't know what benefits a state or a soul. Therefore, just let tyranny happen. Who cares? Maybe vote for which tyrant you like most in the election. The two that are options that are given you every 4 years. And play out the inevitable fate of humanity. Fate, the opposite of destiny. The repeating, stagnant cycles of problems that conclude in a negative state of mind and state of being. And state of the world. Equally so for our soul. If we don't learn this art and change, grow, we will inevitably continue to play out our problems cyclically, resulting in the same failures, the same tragedies, and the same negative states of mind in this life and the next. Fortunately for us, we have a text that isn't manipulated or mistranslated or misinterpreted. with the actual Greek, and we have the technology to look up the keywords for ourselves if we get stuck, or we think a translator might have missed the mark, or if the whole text hangs on the word, let's just see it for ourselves. We can do all that. We can read, we can listen to Socrates' words directly, and that we haven't been able to do for the last 2,500 years. Well, maybe 2,000 years ago they did for a while before they were crushed. The academy was shut down, the libraries were burnt, philosophers were killed or exiled, and the game was stopped. And the beginning of the Dark Ages. Tyranny. Side B, what follows if the Dark Ages, what follows if the art of the Logos isn't present? Fortunately, we can learn it. So we want to know, how do we make that jump? Considering everyone around us isn't talking in this way. Not just that, everyone around us, especially those who claim to be experts, professors, judges, politicians, spiritual priests, even Eastern gurus, reject the Logos. Reject the paradigm, reject the art. How do we make a paradigm shift to there being a paradigm of Logos, to there being a paradigm of being and excellence, and being a paradigm of art? How do we make the paradigm shift to paradigm? Considering this is the world we live in. Well, thankfully, interestingly, Socrates was already also facing that same precarious situation. He was finding that the answers given to him by the experts of the time were not satisfying him in the least. The closest was a guy named Anaxagoras who mentioned mind. Wow. Have you ever been to a class like that? Maybe you've been to a physics class and your physics teacher starts talking about consciousness needed in the universe, or starts talking about Einsteinian relativity and how the world isn't just physical, and you're, oh, this is a teacher that I like. I'm going to do physics for my life. Or maybe you get that one philosophy teacher who says, by the way, we need to look at mind. Qualia was for me. There's one philosophy teacher who talked about qualia, the one word in all of philosophy that wasn't physical, looking to physical things. Qualia means your direct experience. But of course, even that guy very quickly rejected mind and got back into the physical world. Even that physics teacher very quickly rejected consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality of our physical universe and got back into physical electrons and things. Socrates had the same thing. Even Anaxagoras didn't stay in the realm of mind, went quickly back into the physical world of bones and sinews. But Socrates recognized that we're all missing the mark, obviously. Right? You can't explain why we're here by just physical things, because we have consciousness. We make decisions. We are interested in beauty. We seek the good. We use the good to determine what's best for us to do at every moment. So what the hell are you talking about? Not only that, if there are these causes in mind, there must be the causes of that. Causes are one thing, but the condition for which causes have to exist, the conditions that allow causes to be causes, is a whole different paradigm. So there's actually two paradigm shifts, two level jumps. There's not just the third dimension to the fourth dimension, there's a fifth dimension, and maybe sixth and seventh. That's a possibility. Keep that in the back of our minds, keep that in our question sack. But we have to at least make that first jump. Socrates is in the same situation. So what did he do? He had to explore it on our own. Thankfully, we don't have to explore it on our own because we have Socrates. He did it. And now we can actually read his words and discover it without the professors professing the faith or the Gestapo shooting you because you're reading the text for yourself. How dare you? Only the priests can read the texts. That's the kind of crap that was allowed back in the day. Not even like in the last, 1,000 years or so. We're not subject to that. So we can do it. We can pick up what he laid down. We can pick up where we left off as a culture and as an evolving, reincarnating individual too, perhaps. Socrates says, how did I do it? My second search for causes. So causes is a big one. How do you make that jump? Become curious about causes. And the other things, hold your teachers to a standard. See whether they satisfy your questions or not. As soon as they don't, drop them, move on. Don't remain fiercely loyal to people who can't answer questions, reject questions, silence questions, or don't satisfy your questions. Don't remain fiercely, which is important because a lot of humans can't even do that. Blindly loyal to their culture, their society, their family, their religion, their teachers, their profession. Don't do that, number one. But stay curious. Light that fire. Get that power under your activity. Be inspired to seek what? Causes. Why are we here? Apply it to yourself. If they give you reasons, don't just accept the definition, demonstrate it. Apply it. Is the reason you're sitting here watching this because of physical things, because your bones let you? Or have you made a decision based on what you thought is a good activity, a best for you, beneficial for you? So you're kind of using an art whether you know it or not, because you are using whatever you're understanding about the world against whatever you think is most good to determine what's benefit for you. Hey, we're all philosophers, we just haven't learnt to do it right. We are all adventurers, we just haven't learnt the game. We're all playing a hero's journey, we just haven't realized it yet, so we can play it well. We are awakening our true nature and just doing it with excellence. So seek excellence could be one way generally of saying, how do we make that jump? Second, search for causes. And Socrates is laying out the pieces. So just like we pulled out those things, don't be fiercely loyal to ignorance. Ask questions of your teachers, see if it satisfies it. Don't just define it, but demonstrate it, which are 2 steps of the dialectic: definition, demonstration. Make it meaningful to you. Seek causes, which again, dialectic, causal unfolding and causal returning. So this art of dialectic is even motivating us to jump into where we can discover and master the art of dialectic, which is probably part of the art of the logos, if not synonymous. It's a question. So Socrates is outlining what he did, that we have to therefore apply, see if it satisfies us, see if it answers our question. Otherwise, hey, reject Socrates. But we have to match him. We have to do our part before we can accept or reject him, before we can judge him. But then let's judge him. Did it satisfy us or not? Did it allow us to make that jump or not? And he's breaking down the parts so we can exercise ourselves to learn what's involved. And that's what we're doing now. Socrates is helping us. He's saying these are the elements. Pull them out. Put them together. Make them your own. So that we can make that jump for our own art, for our own excellence, for our own purpose, to help our soul to live happier here and the next place. So how do we make that jump? And then once we do make that jump, what are the elements of the art? So we can collect those together so we can bring them together when we have enough of them. The most important thing we can do here, Socrates says, which is master the art of the logos. Human destiny, human rationality, human evolution. Wow. Owen says,
Wow.
With that in mind, let's jump in and do the work. Let's get confused, let's get puzzled, and let's see what happens when we can maintain that state of confusion and puzzledom while following the logos. Discovering the logos is what we're doing. Now we have to follow the logos now that we know that what we're looking for in the text, the way that we read. Discover the logos, follow the logos, and finally, master the logos. Know the logos. Integrate it into our being. Kind of learning we may be able to take with us wherever we go. Let's jump in. Okay. Okay, just to recap, it's not the addition that 2 becomes 2. It's because of the character by partaking. That's a question. How do we partake? Because we want to partake the most in bliss, in beauty, in goodness, in truth, in justice. Partaking in each ousia. So whether it is a magnitude, that makes things greater or lesser, or multitude that makes things more or less, or if it's by participating in the dyad that makes things 2, or participating in the monad to make things 1. For instance, you're 1. You're one person. What makes you 1? What holds you together? Why are you 1? Oh, it's the physical bones holding you together. Well, what are they? Where did they get their force to make things 1? Oh, atoms have strong and weak forces. What gives them the power and the direction? How do they know how to use that power? However you go, there needs to be something causal giving the power, giving the direction, giving the focus and motivation to the physical things to act as they do. Just as there's something giving the motivation and focus for and power for Socrates to stay here and talk in this way rather than run away. Mind. Okay, so when we recognize that, how do we go? Where do we go from there? Okay. Okay, so create a hypothesis. What do you think most okay, let's go through this part again. No, let's ignore this extra bit. All right, so it is through participation or partaking in the greater that the greater is greater and the lesser is lesser. And same thing for magnitude. Participating in the ousia. Okay, so people who give you more sophisticated, and of course we see how that can function by people who try and muddy the waters or gatekeep and to maintain the authority of their own personal opinions. Oh, look how sophisticated my reasoning is. Leave them to their answer, but you being afraid of your own shadow and lack of skill, cling to the safety of that hypothesis. Would answer in this way. But you being afraid, as they say, of your own shadow and lack of skill, by clinging to the safety of that hypothesis, would answer in this way. If someone attacked the hypothesis of self, you would not pay attention to that person and not answer until you had examined whether those consequences follow. Would sound concordant. This is the harmony idea again. Concordant to you or discordant with another. But when you must necessarily give the logos of that self, you would deliberate in the same way. By hypothesizing another hypothesis, take another if statement, whether it comes to light best of the loftier ones. Okay, so pick which works best until you come upon something sufficient. Okay, so pick the loftier ones. In other words, use your highest vision, your highest understanding to develop a hypothesis to explain things. Now, there must be a systematic way of examining it to see what comes to light, or what are the consequences that follow. So there has to be an examination of the consequences of that hypothesis. And then you can test other hypotheses. By the way, so consequences that follow, both concordant and discordant. So we can recognize, hang on a second, that sounds like side A and side B. Or in the division step, is what follows concordant? Is there a harmony that follows if the hypothesis is true? Or is there a contradiction or discord that takes place that might disprove? So in other words, using a silly, simple example, every day at work, the sandwiches I put in the fridge for lunch go missing. My hypothesis is Frank keeps stealing them, my coworker Frank. So that's a hypothesis. Hypothesis, if Frank is stealing my sandwiches. Now, in the division step, you might say, okay, what happens on Monday? What happens on Tuesday? What happens on Wednesday? On Wednesday, Frank isn't there, but your sandwiches still go missing. So therefore, there's a kind of discord that might disprove that hypothesis. So create another one. Maybe it's Janie acting to steal your sandwiches. And see which one works best, which comes to light best. So we have coming to light best. So what are we doing right now? We're pulling out the key terms, applying them to our own experiences, creating examples, thumbs up. We're doing a dialectic as we go to try and understand what Socrates is leaving us. And what's the standard? This is one of the topics of one of the previous episodes. What should change our mind? And one of the key words that we're getting is when people say something is sufficient. It was sufficient. But you should not mix the dry with the wet, just as the controversialists do. So we've got a cool word for those who love fighting, philonikos, by discussing the cause and effects, right? Modern media, modern politicians, a lot of people who want to claim smart, a lot of people who sell programs to get rich, they mix the dry and the wet. They go from cause to effect and they flip around to confuse. So we don't want to do that. If we want to find, and remember our goal, we want to find the real beings. That's our goal. So we want to make that jump to the realm of real being, but also know them, understand and know them. And that's what and then by the way, the greatest defect, the hating and reviling of the logos, is so great a defect because we won't reach the real beings. So it's tying back in with what we said earlier. This is the positive that we saw the negative of earlier. So we've got an A and a B for this. What if it does? What if it doesn't? Okay, and don't get into fighting with these people who try and use sophisticated words to confuse you. Screw them. Let them have their own opinions. You need to be satisfied yourself. Don't be silenced. Don't be told you're not good enough, or you can't understand, or politics is too complicated, or economics is too complicated, or law is too complicated, or philosophy is too complicated. Screw that gatekeeping nonsense. This is important for you. Okay? And, so stay with the cause. Okay. You could say, well, I'm kind of talking about the effects every now and then. But that's a way of demonstrating what we're seeing. These are the effects. Our everyday world is the effects of not having the real beings, of not having the art of the logos. Okay, so in regards to these, they equally neither give account of or thought to, for being sufficiently enabled by their wisdom, they mix everything together. So I think this is a bit of a jab here. Don't think he actually means wisdom. What they think is wisdom. They mix everything together. And at the same time, being unable to selves, being acceptable to selves. But on the other hand, if indeed you are philosophically inclined, there's our philosophia, I think you will do as I say. So it's acceptable to them to jump around, right? If you ever listen to a politician talk, ever listen to an interviewer on the news or on a talk show, interview them, It's perfectly acceptable for them to jump around and go from causes to effect and not actually address the causes. So what would be the opposite? In every interview, in every political debate, in every news network interview, or even just news story, stick to the cause. What's the cause of problems? Oh, we need police on the street abusing minorities because that's where the crime is. So what's the cause here? No, forget about that. We need to clean up the streets. I'm tough on crime, right? Does that make you feel safer? Ignore the real issues. No. What's the cause? Let's write it down on the board. Oh, the cause you are saying is minority people are inherently bad. More bad than whatever, non-minorities. That's the cause, right? Oh, yes, but just look at all of the effects. Look at all, by the way, is that really the cause? Or is that racism? Is that a scapegoat? Let's stick to the cause. By the way, are they the most exploited, impoverished, targeted, scapegoated people? Let's look at the cause. Is the cause not really that, but the cause racism? Or the cause to scapegoat so people get distracted from the true causes? What's the true cause of crime? Oh, wealth inequality, poverty. Oh, what's the cause of that? Billionaires sitting on mountains of wealth like dragons, exploiting the rest of the world to get there. Oh, what's the cause of that? Stay on the causes and hold them to account. Hey, if this is your cause, let's look at if it is the truth that minorities are naturally bad, and then we need to abuse them and make them suffer because there's no way of actually learning about the cause is their innate nature. We need to wipe them out. We need to genocide. There's no understanding. There's no actual understandable, solvable causes. It's just you're just evil. And therefore genocide or mass exploitation or police brutality, that's all acceptable. Let's look at that cause, because that might be bullshit. It might be the actual cause is you need that kind of fear, distraction, and violence to enslave. And it's the enslavement and the exploitation and the hoarding of wealth and the lying to people for them to act against their best interest to the media. These might be the causes. Okay, so that's a real world example, but we want to apply it to our soul. Are we having problems because we are innately bad or sinful, or because of the devil? It's not because there is a logos and paradigm that we are missing the mark on. No. It's just, you're either born perfect or you ain't. No, hold on to that. Let's see if that's a true cause. Try that hypothesis. See what follows. What's going to follow if you're either born perfect or you ain't? Well, there's no reason for being here. We're here just to suffer. Does suffering make you better? No, it makes you worse. Everybody. It's easy to see that. So therefore, we live in an unrational, unjust world. But that can't be true because we know that we can learn if people are supported and encouraged. And the more wealth equality and the more financial stability, the more we can learn, the better we are, the more we can help, the more we're able to help. So these are things that are, those hypotheses are not sufficient. And the conclusions, the consequences that follow are discordant with one another. You can't say this, but also recognize this. You can't say, oh, problems are caused because of devil or because of innate nature or because of racism, because people are just bad by nature, but also realize, oh, hang on a second, everybody learns the same way, everybody seeks the good. All problems just follow from ignorance of that good, the shadow of the art of the logos. But if we have the art of the logos, everyone can be benefited. And hey, here's a story of Achilles doing so through the art of the logos and dream analysis. They are not in concordant with each other, they're discordant with each other. Likewise for the other hypothesis. For ourselves. Oh, the hypothesis is, hey, Maybe the cause of our making a mistake spiritually or within our lives, or a negative state of mind that has a limiting force in our life, is because we are loyal students to a bad teacher. We developed that loyalty before we were old enough to develop the logos, the art of the logos. And we happen to grow in a society where you're stuck in a box with parents who can act however the hell they want. There's no paradigm, there's no oversight. You can't go up the street and live with someone else when your parents are being unjust. You're stuck. Well, let's see if that's concordant with the other things that follow. Well, is Socrates talking about, so this idea is it's a shadow. You're a loyal student to a bad teacher. What if we had a good teacher? What if our teacher was Socrates or the self-logos? What if what the logos said was true? Using being as the paradigm, what if we were so loyal to that we did it all the time? That's the virtues. Wow. To desire it at all times, to hold on to it as true at all times, to use it as our planning at all times, to function with it at all times. Those are the 4 virtues. In other words, the consequences that follow are concordant. Our cause of our problems within our soul are not because of the devil or because we're innately bad or because we suck and we're stupid and we're bad, we're nasty people and need to be punished by the billionaires for all of time and enslaved because we're not good enough. No. In this life and in hell afterwards. No. That's discordant. What's concordant is, hang on a second. If our problem is that we're a good student to a bad teacher, then if we had a good teacher, we are developing the virtues. The same paradigm, our soul isn't bad, we just have usurpers to the throne, people who claim to be wise or appear wise or act wise when they're not. When it's good that we seek wisdom, that's good that we're following a teacher. It's good that we're good students, we're just given bad teachers. So that's a consequence that would follow. That sounds concordant. That's using our loftiest, I think he mentions it earlier, loftiest understanding and vision. I didn't highlight it. I should have highlighted it. I think he uses something else other than loftiest. No, we can use loftiest. Right, so it uses our loftiest understanding and vision. In other words, everything you've been learning from this read along, everything that you've been learning from this channel and this text in your own reading and the Discord, however you're participating, however you're partaking in the ideal of this group, use your loftiest vision and understanding to create your best hypothesis, to see if what comes to light is best. So again, you're using what, as far as you know of the good, use that. You don't have to be perfect, just use your best. Do your best, the same way as everything we do is we think it's the most good. So just hold yourself, don't cut yourself down. Don't cut yourself off at the knees or shoot yourself in the foot. Do your best. Okay, so that's a hypothesis, and we use that shadow hypothesis, good student to a bad teacher. That was our loftiest vision and understanding, to see if what comes to light is best by seeing the consequences that follow, see if they're discordant or concordant with each other, leaving the more complicated answers to people who want to fight and argue. Don't get into it with them. They're not going to be persuaded anyway. That's just a trap. Stay focused on the causes. Don't get distracted and mix the dry with the wet like those controversialists do, or lovers of fighting, philonikos, because it's acceptable to them but not to us, even if it's acceptable to everybody else, because they say that, oh, I'm wise so I can do this and I think it's okay. Don't fall into that. Instead, see if it was something sufficient comes to light for you. So that's part of it, big part of it. We're learning as we're going. Thumbs up. Thank you, Socrates. Good. Thank you so much. He's giving us how we do it and what we're going to come to when we get there. To which both Simius and Cebes at the same time says, "You speak most truthfully." Yay. They go, "Yay."
Wow. Wow. Wow.
"You speak most truthfully," says Simius and Cebes. "Yes, by Zeus, O Phaedo." So there's Socrates, he's the guy leading, well, he's the guy who asked Phaedo to give the recount, and Phaedo is our narrator. So Socrates says, "Yes, by Zeus, O Phaedo, reasonably so indeed. For it appears to me that he explained these matters in a wonderfully clear way, even to anyone in possession of a small amount of intelligence, a small amount of nous. So if you disagree with anything that's been said, you are a dummy. You don't even have a small amount of intelligence. And we say to you, of course, that's not true. It's just a funny little comment by Socrates. Of course, it has to be sufficient for you. But Socrates says, yeah, even anyone with a small amount of intelligence would see that this is wonderfully clear. All right. Maybe he's very smart, or maybe he's kind of doing the work we're doing at the same time. "By all means so, O Socrates," says Phaedo, "and it did so appear to all those present." Socrates, "And so, too, those of us who were not present." Yeah, you and me too. "But hear of it now." Okay, so we were not present, but we're hearing of it now. So hopefully it is as clear to you as it is to... Excuse me, this mic stand is being a bit silly. It's getting a bit old. So maybe it's as clear to you who were not present as it is to the people there and our friend Socrates. But what then? What was said after these logos? Phaedo, "As I think then, after these logos had been accepted by self." Interesting. So it's accepted by Simius and Cebes, Socrates, and Phaedo. But notice his language. Accepted by self. Hang on a second. Ain't there a whole bunch of people there? Is that a question? Why is he saying self? Let's keep reading. "And it was also agreed that each one of these ideas exist." Okay? So they all agree that the individual, what did he say? Each ousia. So each one of these ideas, which can also be called each one of these ousias, exist. And that other things acquired their name by participating of these ideas, of these selves, okay? Selves, honorific, can mean ideas, or ousias. So that's why they get their name. We call them beauty because they participate. That's how they get the name beauty. So the rest of the sentence didn't really help us. Why is he saying self when there are a bunch of them accepting it? Also, maybe this is a callback to, these ideas, these self-ousias, because all of those ideas have their existence in the hyparxis. That was one of the things brought up earlier. So if it's been accepted by selves, maybe they're realizing, hang on a second, or maybe they're thinking accepted by self. Because maybe they're seeing the implications of the arguments that have come so far, meaning there's a hyparxis of soul. There's a single soul. In the same way that we saw there was a hyparxis of the beings. Therefore, hyparxis of self. Maybe, hypothesis. Put it in the same. Carry it with us. Surely then after that, Socrates said, surely then, if you say this in this way, then accordingly, when you say that Simmias is taller than Socrates, but shorter than Phaedo, oh, okay, that's interesting. Phaedo's quite tall. Yeah, somewhere I didn't realize Simmias was... Simmias is taller than Socrates, interesting. But you do not mean at that time that there exists in Simmias both greatness and smallness. I do, at least. Okay. Now, keyword in. Exists in. Simmias is taller than Soc, but shorter than Phaedo. But you do not mean Simmias has both greatness and smallness, do you? CB says I do. But you certainly agree that the statement, as stated in the words, Simmias surpasses Socrates, do not possess the truth of that matter. For surely it is not in the nature of Simmias to surpass because he is Simmias, but through the magnitude which Simmias happens to possess. Through the magnitude. Nor again does he surpass Socrates because Socrates is Socrates, but because of the smallness. Oh, and by the way, magnitude, it was great. So let's remove that. That word we looked up is great. Which is important because he's saying there is a kind of ousia called greatness. Now, greatness as a noun, he's saying is magnitude, but smallness is the other kind of ousia, also present in the hyparxis of ousia, that Socrates possesses in relation to the magnitude of that other. So Socrates partakes in the idea of smallness, Simmias partakes in the idea of greatness, and the relation to which they do so gives their comparative judgments. Interesting? That makes sense. You partake in greatness and smallness. I partake in greatness. Oh, hang on a second. In Simmias. So it's not in Simmias. So this is why he's saying it is Simmias. It's not because he is Simmias. Not because he is Simmias. In other words, it doesn't exist in Simmias. You say someone's beautiful. You're not beautiful because you're you. You're partaking in beauty. And if I say that you're more beautiful than me, then the amount to which you partake in beauty in relation to the amount I partake in beauty gives us that comparative judgment. It's not because I am me that I'm ugly, or that you are you because you're beautiful. It's the extent to which we partake in the ideas, which goes back to our previous hypothesis of what causes human problems. Is it because we're evil and therefore we need to be genocided or enslaved or used with capitalism, the threat of starvation to exploit us because we're innately bad, put in jail because we're innately bad? Is that the reason? Or is it due to the amount to which we partake in excellence, in goodness, in justice? Even those people who are justifying their tyranny and their injustice in the world. Is it because they're evil and they need to be murdered? No. It's the amount to which they're partaking in justice. And compared to us partaking in the study of justice, we could say we are partaking more in the study of justice through listening to Socrates, reading for ourselves, learning the art. Therefore, we can say relative, we are partaking more in justice. And our problems are the extent to which we are partaking in justice. And likewise, the extent to which the doctor partakes in the art of medicine should be given the name doctor over others. Likewise, gurus, politicians, philosophers, etc. But their job is to use their art specifically to benefit others, not for the fame or riches that result. So these are more consequences that follow because we've hypothesized our loftiest idea to explain the cause. So we hold on to this hypothesis as we go, and the more we learn, just as the more we've been learning about being, the more we can put into our hypothesis, our dialectic, if being exists and if it doesn't. So you keep learning as you grow, you keep holding on to it, and hey, if something doesn't work, come up with a new one, hypothesize another hypothesize in turn, and see if that comes to light best and sufficient. So far, what we're seeing about it's not because you are it that makes you just or unjust, ugly or beautiful, great or small. No. It's the extent to which you partake in it. It's not because you're evil or because of your nature. So it's following. It's still concordant. So we keep holding on to the hypothesis. So we're doing well. Let's keep going. It's not because of what he is, but it's participating in the selves. Okay. It's not because Socrates is Socrates, it's because of the smallness that Socrates possesses in relation to the greatness of the other. In the chat, did you know 3 approaches to psychotherapy from the Orange Book is on YouTube? What? What is this? 3 approaches to psychotherapy is on YouTube? What are those 3? Philosophical counseling, philosophical midwifery. What do you call it? Dialectic-based psychotherapy, I'm guessing. And I think I dialogued with myself today, and it was a difficult thing. Interesting. That's an old video that you shared. Where did you come across this video? Socrates taught persons to do the same. Can't remember the name. Interesting. Well, so, Socrates is saying, hey, by the way, the things that we have is because of our participation in the particular ousia, but it's not because simius is greatness is smallest. It's not because of your nature. It's the extent to which you participate in the idea, and you are greater and smaller than someone depending on the amount to which you participate in those ideas relative to another person. Right, oh, cool. Philosophical midwifery. Oh, so somebody else was using the philosophical midwifery of the Orange Book in that very old, was it from the 60s, YouTube video that you shared me. That's interesting. Good. The more people doing it, the better. Okay. True, says CBs. Socrates, nor indeed again is he to some degree surpassed by Phaedo by reason of Phaedo being Phaedo. Socrates is bringing he's already talking about Phaedo, but because of the magnitude which Phaedo possesses in relation to the shortness of Simius. So we are different from each other, but it's based on the possession in relation to. How much do you share in ugliness compared to me sharing in beauty? Now, I don't think ugliness is one of the things, because I think greatness and smallness have ideas, have ousias. But beauty, so some of them come along with their opposites, like same and different. They have their own existence in ousia, and you can discover this by going through the Parmenides. But some are just on its own, like beauty itself. Ugliness doesn't have an existence. Likewise, goodness and evil. That evil doesn't have an existence, which is important because that's the hypothesis that we held on to and showed that there was discordant results that follow. Okay, so right, it's not 1 and 0. There's 1 and many in chat. So there are certain classes of ideas, like ones that have their own like beauty, justice, goodness. Injustice doesn't have an existence in being, but then there are ones that come as pairs, like same and different, like and unlike. And then there are some that seem to come as a 3, and like lesser, greater, and equal. So that's interesting. Types of self are groups. And then, of course, that opens a whole bunch of other questions that I've been carrying around for a long time. And we'll keep that in our question sack. What's the implications? What are the consequences of there being different classes of self terms? Considering they all share the same hypothesis. Let's try it out. So, possession in relation to the possession of another idea from the other. Accordingly then, in this way, Simius is given the name short and tall, which he has by being both in the middle of both. So here we have the idea of naming. There is something important in the art of the logos to do with naming, and that naming is in relation to how much we participate in the ideas, or the ousias. Simius is in the middle, so he gets given both. Supplying the shortness to be surpassed by the tallness, while on the other hand, presenting his tallness to overcome the shortness. He can't be taller than Soc unless he has some tallness, and he can't be shorter than Simius unless he has some shortness. Phaedo, at the same time, smilingly. So Socrates, with a smile, said. So this argument shows that the more to which, like, we want to participate more in not greatness or tallness or shortness, but justice and beauty and goodness and truth. So we have the question, okay, if this is what's the cause, how do we get more of it? How do we be greedy for the logos? So Socrates, with a smile, said, I seem to be talking like a book. Interesting. But it certainly has to be indeed as I say. Okay, so Socrates realizing he's doing a lot of talking right now. And usually he's asking questions and stuff of his friends and outlining arguments. Yeah, in question format. So that's a dialectic too, questions and answers. Naming things properly, judging whether or not the answers were sufficient. So he caught himself saying, oh, I'm monologuing a bit. I'm talking like a book a little bit. Phaedo agreed, but I speak in this way because I wish that it appears to you in the same way it does to me. For it has come to light for me that not only the great self will in no way come near to being great and small at the same time, but also that the great in us will never admit or receive the small, nor come near to being surpassed. But one of two things happens. It either flees and withdraws when its opposite, the small, approaches, kind of like a magnet, or like when the positive pole approaches the negatively charged metal flees or withdraws, or it is destroyed by the approach of that. Interesting. Thus, it will not abide the presence nor receive the small, and be other than that which it was. So this is interesting because this is the question that Socrates came in with in the opening of the Parmenides when he started his journey. So here we are reading the end. He wanted to know, how can like and unlike be together as the ideas? They're opposites. How can you have the idea of likeness and the idea of unlikeness in being if it's the same ousia? Well, here he's saying, look, like, I don't know, 50 years later or something like that. The self-great, okay? Self-great. So the self has the word honorific, meaning in the beings. The self-great will in no way come near to being great and small at the same time. So the ousia of great won't be small. And the great in us, so the amount to which we partake in the greatness, can never receive the small, nor come near to being surpassed, whatever that means. But one of two things happened. Either it flees or withdraws, flees and withdraws, when its opposite approaches, or it is destroyed by that approach. Now, this is interesting because we want to be developing the virtues within our soul. So we can't be being virtue and vice at the same time. If virtue is pursuing the logos directed towards being, well, in one expression, pursuing the art of the logos in everything we do, then it can't also be pursuing our other desires at the same time. As vice is introduced, the opposite flees or is destroyed by it. Can't be both at the same time. Now, we're not talking about virtue and vice in our physical world. We're talking about the ideas, the principles, the more fundamental principles that need to exist for there to be virtue and vice. There needs to be great and small, same and different, like and unlike. Okay? Thus, it will not abide by the presence nor receive the small, and be other than that which it is. So it can't be other than that which it is. Equality will never be inequality. Beauty will never be ugliness. I don't know whether ugliness has a being, but great will never be small. Can't. The fundamental forces of reality would all break down if it could be. In fact, that was necessary because when we held up the two sticks earlier and said, hey, look, they look equal, but someone looking for a different angle, actually from my angle, they don't look equal at all. So they look unequal. So this was the kind of question that led us into philosophy, because Socrates asked the question, does equality itself ever appear unequal? No. Therefore, there's a fundamental difference then between the equality we see as adjectives applied to the physical world of becoming, which can appear unequal, and equality itself in being. It's a standard and a kind of line of questioning that we need to follow to wake up to philosophy. Just as I receive and keep smallness, and still remain being just as I am this same person. But that being great cannot undertake or endure to be small. Okay, so we're kind of receptacles in a sense. I keep and receive smallness and still remain as I am. This is a curious implication for the one self too, by the way. There's a receiving and keeping the ideas, but greatness cannot endure to be small. Therefore, in the same way, just as the smallness in us is not ever willing to become, the smallness in us is not ever willing to become nor to be great, neither does any other of the opposites become or be its opposite at the same time, and still remain being just as it was. But it either departs or destroys when it happens. Interesting. If you're taking in greatness and smallness comes in and departs, the greatness departs or destroyed. Interesting. What's the implications for justice? What's the implications for virtue? What's the implications for goodness and truth? It has come to light to me to be altogether in this way, says Cebes. Phaedo says, when one of those present heard this, I do not clearly remember who it was. He said, okay, so now we have the unknown person. This unknown person says, by the gods, are not the statements just now given in self-opposition to what we agreed upon earlier, in our earlier logos? That the greater arose out of the lesser, and the lesser from the greater. Interesting. And that was simply the self-generation of opposites from their opposites. But now it seems to me we are saying this could never happen. Interesting. Now, this is interesting because we've already seen that there is a kind of logos of this physical world, of a coming to be from its opposite. Like Socrates said in the opening, isn't it curious? Actually, let's go back to the opening. Unknown person here. Unknown person is saying, hey, tie this work together. Let's go right back to the start. Socrates saying, hey, listen, dudes. Socrates says, okay, take self home. How strange, O men, this thing seems to be. This is Socrates' first thing he said was, Credo, let someone take self home. The second thing said, how strange, O men, this thing seems to be, which human beings call pleasure, and how wonderfully it is naturally disposed to that which is believed to be its opposite, painful. Since on the one hand, they will not come to be all together at the same time. Interesting. In the human self. But if, on the other hand, one pursues and catches one, they are almost sure to necessarily catch the other also. Just as if the two were united together from one summit. And it seems to me, if Aesop has envisioned selves, he would have composed a myth that God wished to reconcile the warring opposition of selves. But since this was not possible, united their summits to the same. And by this, whichever one may be present, the other will also follow later. Thus, the same reconciliation also seems fitting for me, seeing that just as at one time the chains caused suffering in my leg, but now the pleasant has come to light, following after. Now this opening sentence has a lot more weight for us now. Now we've also seen there is a warring opposites of people in our everyday world. We've talked about the opposites of groups: left versus right, rich versus poor, Jews versus Palestinians, Christians versus Protestants, etc. And we are constantly at war with what seems to be the opposite. And this reconciliation is only when we can reach that which is the united at the summit. Now, so this warring opposition of pleasure and pain has more implications now. It's the kind of logos of the natural world. When we don't have the art of the logos, when we can't go to a philosophy, like bears fighting antelope, barbarians in the human species, we've lived so far a barbarian history, but we can only resolve this through reaching our self-summit. Now, self-summit has a new meaning for us, given our reading. Hyparxis, there is a summit that unites all of the ousias, and apply that argument to souls. There is a hyparxis or self-summit of souls. Right? So we're seeing this, our question is, well, where is this self-summit that Aesop would unite pleasure and pain? So we're seeing more in this opening now. Okay, and this kind of logos, and now that we have also recognized that there is an unfolding through reflection or likeness from like our 3D, there's a reflection into our 2D mirror. Likewise, the logos has an unfolding, allowing us to understand reality and to climb back through the progression through causes to our destiny, the first and final cause, which means there is a kind of logos in our physical world that isn't the true logos, but is its kind of reflection, which brings us back to that reflection we did on the man versus bear meme debate. Would you rather be caught in the woods on your own with a bear who is just simply partaking in that opposites? He's either hungry or he's not. Or a man who doesn't just partake in the opposites of the physical, has mind. This level of causes we need to open ourselves up to that can be difficult, and was difficult for Socrates because there weren't a lot of people talking about mind, as there are not a lot of people talking about mind today, compared to physical causes. Now, because man has mind, he doesn't just have the opposites of virtue or lack of virtue, he has the reflection. The blind loyalty to what he thinks is most real and clear, which could be terrible. Psychopaths, murderers. I get to be a terrible person because my dad was like that to me, and therefore this is most clear and real, therefore I get to do it to somebody else. So all of these terrible, and we have the internet, so it's easy to see how many terrible, awful things people think are true, think are real, think are just, motivating their actions. So this idea that everybody should be entitled to their beliefs, or rather everyone should be entitled to their ignorance, is a terrible way of thinking, because people act on it as if it's true. This is the cause of terrible, grotesque things. Therefore, if you run into a man alone in the forest, he's not going to eat you, but he can do all these other terrible things because he thinks that's most real, because it's the shadow of the logos. It's not the opposite of the logos, it's the shadow of the logos. And this is what we address in philosophical midwifery or true psychotherapy, using the art of the logos to recognize not just the truth, the paradigm, but also its shadow. People who act in terrible ways because they think it's okay or just or good or they deserve it, and so on. Slaves to their body, slaves to the image of justice. And of course, Socrates mentioned recently, it's the same art. The same art to know this would recognize this. The same art that could recognize the healthy body, and medicine can recognize the illnesses of the body. Same too for the soul. So, this is the question. For the bear, for the back and forth logos of opposites in our physical world, then it seems that the same comes out of the different, or the greatness comes from the smallness, or the cold becomes hot, or the bear becomes hungry and then full, and then hungry and then full. One comes from the other. But we're not talking about the logos of the physical world. We're talking about the realm of being. So this calls back to the opening of this book, but also the opening of Socrates' journey, because he was having a difficulty with this problem. He was using a language of the logos of the world of becoming, back and forth, which is a language of war, which is a language of opposition. And we see the implications in humanity and within our soul, inner conflict and conflict within the species, at war with our planet, at war with each other, at war with reason itself. But Socrates is saying, hey, like in the realm of being that we have to admit exists and is the cause of our physical world, they do not come back and forth from opposites. Okay, so, right, the back and forth of opposites is the kind of logos for irrational beings or two-dimensional beings, you could say. I mean, you call them three-dimensional beings. Yeah, two-dimensional beings maybe. Sensation and perceptions like bears. But Socrates saying, hey, in the realm of being, right? In the realm of being, it's not that back and forth of opposites. You can't have, if you have smallness present in the aspect of the good, greatness is either destroyed or hides. What do you say? The word retreats. So tying it back to the beginning of the text, where Socrates makes this enigmatic statement, which should be a puzzle that we're here to solve if we're reading correctly. What the hell is he talking about? Why is he talking about pleasure and pain? Why is he talking about a summit? Why is that summit the same or the self? Can have two meanings in Greek. And why is he saying pain and pleasure are believed to be opposites? And why is he talking about mythologizing it with Aesop? Lots of puzzles that we can see more, but also see more having gone through it and returning again. This is the ousia, this is the dialectic. And the person that triggered us to return was this unknown person. Not only that, we can return to Socrates' beginning, not just in the text, but in his life. Because when he started his journey, he was using this language of the physical world to try and make sense of the realm of ideas. And Parmenides says, look, you're going to be stuck unless you learn this thing that the many call useless, but is called the dialectic. You have to collect yourself together. Interesting, because Socrates' yoga was about collecting yourself together out of the body by exercising more in that way that appears useless to the multitude. That's right. How many people are into the dialectic nowadays? Almost none. Same for back then. And it's called by them empty talk, for if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will utterly elude you. That was his instructions. So it's tying back to even then. Okay. So let's skip forward. Where we were. So we see this other person with a similar puzzle. The self-generation. Notice the generation. Generation applies to the realm of becoming. That's what becoming means, to generate and decay. And hearing this, Socrates turned his head to listen and said,
Wow.
And then he said,
What? 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 What?
So Socrates, you have bravely reminded us. However, you do not bear the difference in mind between that which is said now and what was said at that time. For on the one hand, oh goodness, on the one hand, the word is men. If you get, for those watching along, if you are going to exercise yourself in a good way by doing a new translation, please get rid of these on the one hands. I hate them so much. They're so clumsy to say and they take so long. But also men, so you can just say if. Just say if. And then on the other hand, it's der. So it's men and der. Look at that. 2 letters is translated into. And also, we don't have 2 hands either. This men and der doesn't necessarily mean 2. It's not a strictly dual option. And I've been in groups where people have been confused by not realizing that der doesn't necessarily mean 2. It could be many options. So there are Greeks are like octopi. I just hate having to repeat the same phrase over and over again. 4. If at that time we said that the opposite condition arose from its opposite condition, but now we say that the self-opposite, great, could never become opposite, small, to itself, neither that in us or in nature, so within us and to the level we're partaking, or in its nature. For at that time, my friend, if works, and then but works for der. In fact, I remember So Pierre would say, you can summarize philosophy with 2 words, ifs and buts. That's all you need, ifs and buts. Of course, ifs we're recognizing as the hypotheses. Thumbs up. So this earlier what he said, how we reason, we have to develop our best hypotheses, our loftiest hypotheses, and hypothesize another one in turn to see what comes to light best, which hypothesis is most concordant with the consequences or discordant, so we can find the real beings sufficiently. So there's the ifs. Buts would be side B. But if philosophy wasn't, so, and then we can say if instead of men and say but instead of der. So let's keep that in mind. It's hard to do when I'm reading, but I'll try my best. So, so within the nature or within themselves, within us, the self opposite, great, could never become its opposite. So great could never become small, but we can become great and small. But that great, that ousia itself won't change. For at that time, my friend, if we spoke about those that possess opposite conditions, whose selves are named after those conditions, but now we are talking about those selves by whose presence those that are named possess their name. So before, when we were talking about the coming from opposite, we were talking about those that are named after these conditions. But now we are talking about those selves by whose presence we give them their name. And furthermore, we say that those selves cannot ever intend or wish to allow or accept their generation from each other. So our generation doesn't come from, you don't come great from small, or they both come from self-ousia. Different from those conditions who possess their name in the physical world. So we can say, yeah, in the physical world, we are seeking justice, we are seeking destiny, which must come from a world that we're currently in of injustice, apparent injustice through time. So in becoming, one comes from the other. So likewise, if learning is remembering, it has to come from forgetting to remembering. But the ideas themselves, justice itself, doesn't come from its opposite. Greatness doesn't come from its opposite, smallness. And at that time, says Phaedo, while looking at Cebes, he said, accordingly then, certainly nothing that this man said also disturbs you, O Cebes. Notice that's what we're after. The whole reason why we're going through this is because something somebody said, Simmias and Cebes, disturbed everyone. They were following along with the 4 arguments of the immortality of the soul, the Enderman argument, the resources argument, the cyclical nature argument, and the learning from remembering that Cebes laid out for us, and then Socrates divided up for us to follow for ourselves. Then they came up with these arguments that sound probable, like science, or attractive, like our cultural or religious upbringing and mythology, and that disturbed everyone. That's why we're here. Now this guy, so again, a similar thing happened. Socrates is saying you need to learn the art of the logos so these people don't knock you off and get you to hate the logos. Can't do that. It's the worst condition of the soul. And so that's where we are. So hopefully we've learned enough about how the causes of what we are, causes, remember Socrates' second search for causes. Causes are the ousias, the ideas, the aspects in beings that we can partake of to a greater or lesser amount. That are from the world of becoming, which are generating from opposites. They can't be generated from their opposites. And of course, the next question is, well, how do we partake more in the good stuff? Okay, and then this guy says, hang on a second, what about that other stuff about coming from opposites? And Socrates says, oh, when we talked about that, we talked about things that shared the name, which we call now adjectives. Things that share the name of beauty, beautiful things, beautiful person, beautiful Jed. Wow. These things that share the name, adjectives, but not the things themselves. Beauty doesn't come from ugliness. That doesn't make sense. Self-beauty. Okay, so we're talking about different things, adjectives and nouns. Now he's asking, okay, did this guy who jumped in, did he disturb you? The same way, the argument of harmony, soul is a byproduct of the physical, and the argument of the last coat. Yeah. You don't outlive your last jacket, or being human wears your soul down, so you should be afraid of death. These disturbed us before. Does this one disturb you now? So it's kind of a question. Are you learning the art of the logos? Or is this opinion familiar enough to put you off the logos the same way the harmony and the last jacket argument did? Let's see what he says. CB says, not at the moment. Okay, good, you're not disturbed. But then again, I have been disturbed, and certainly I say that such objections do often disturb me. Interesting. So this kind of argument, appealing to the physical world, okay, which a lot of people do today. Look at the hierarchy of lobsters, says Jordan Peterson. Therefore, we should apply this logos of the back and forth of opposites of our physical world, the shadow of the logos in the realm of becoming. We should use that to organize society or understand the nature of the divine or live our lives or organize religion or spirituality. Okay? This can disturb people against the logos. Same thing to any tyrants, or say, oh yeah, we should fight each other. We should have racism. We should have rich and poor. We should have inequality. It's natural. It's survival of the fittest. Look at the physical world. Monkeys do it, so we should do it. Hey, it's all sexual selection and random mutation through sexual selection. Isn't that evolution of the physical world? Coming together of opposites, breeding, opposites genes coming together. CV says, yeah, in the past that has convinced me. Right now, we're talking about being. A conversation that, apart from Socrates, there ain't a lot of people talking in this way. So it's not disturbing me right now, but it has in the past. This person is putting forth the idea that most people in our current world use. Right now it seems unattractive because we're reasoning through it. We're partaking in the logos. We're sharing in the ousia of the logos. But we're also seeing what philosophy isn't. The politicians, the people who think, oh yeah, it's okay to put people in prison because physical, right? You do something bad, you get a whack, or you get a punishment or a fine. That will change your mind. Oh no, wait, we don't talk about mind. It will change your physical behavior. This is the cause of, he said it many times, human, where is it? Discord, division, war, warring of opposites. Over and over and over, he's saying this is the cause of problems. Discord. Controversialists, lovers of fighting, lovers of debate. People who can't reason well but mix together causes and effects. He's describing the nature of our world. So, this person kind of summarizes this kind of way of thinking. People who appeal to the logos of becoming, which isn't the real logos, but a shadow, has a kind of existence for beings who do not partake in the logos, like bears. But also that lack of partaking in the art of the logos can be used to justify what they really want. Those people who say, oh, it's a warring of opposites, don't actually use that to justify what they're doing. They use it to justify their vice, what they think is good. They want to enslave, not because enslaving helps the species move on. No, they want the power to abuse that in certain ways. That's why people want slavery. They want to hurt people in a way they were hurt, so they can play the knower in a way that they think makes them wise and good, fulfilling their sexual needs or their power needs or their wealth, seeking of wealth or fame, to feel big and knowing. That's not opposites. They're using the logos of opposites to justify the shadow, their pathologos, so they can be tyrants. Look at how the billionaires act. Look at all of them. They're not acting justly for humanity. They'll say, oh no, pick one, Elon Musk. I need to take over Twitter to make it more freedom of speech. And the first thing he does is remove freedom of speech, make it a racist Nazi playground. That's not more freedom, that's his own personal racism and pathologos. So this is the problem. And we can understand it. What is it? An absence of partaking in the self-ousia or the idea of the art of the logos, and instead using their physical senses to look at the logos of the physical world of becoming to justify playing out the shadow of the logos, their injustice or their tyranny. Right? Recently it was the 4th of July. What's the whole thing with the 4th of July? Columbus saying, oh, look, they're savages. We need to, therefore, survival of the fittest, or the way the world is, or we need to make them better because they're the opposite of civilized. Therefore, whatever we do is justified because that's the natural law of the physical world. But really, I'm going to be the most terrible person, the most sick, abusive, violent, sexually deviant, torturous person ever, because that's what really motivated him. Why? Because he lacked the art of the logos to recognize the paradigm of true justice and to recognize its deviation. So in other words, no one was saying this isn't good. There wasn't the paradigm. Why? Because shortly after Socrates, the Roman Empire and the Catholic Church killed this way of thinking, killed the logos, and now we're populated by experts who are doing this very thing. Experts in inverted commas. In other words, we lost the words of Socrates sharing the art of the logos. But we can pick it up now. Now we can develop the three things that are rejected. What are they? The understandable nature of reality, the logos, the paradigm in being, and the artful use to benefit that requires all of it. We can learn the art of the logos to recognize health, beauty, justice, excellence, greatness, magnitude. Health was literally one of the words mentioned, and also recognize the injustice. So those who were defending Christopher Columbus in his tyrannical, unjust, shadow of being use of his power over others was, oh, it's a different time. No, it's always the same time. Slaves don't like being slaves. No one likes injustice ever. It's not a different time. It's not like the slaves like, oh yeah, we're in a different time. We like being abused and murdered and tortured and raped. Yeah, we love it. More of that, please, because we're a different time. Bollocks. Why? Because the paradigm always remains the paradigm. We all seek justice. We all seek truth. The cause wasn't different time. It was oppression justified by pointing to the physical world, extracting a back and forth of opposites or a hierarchy in nature to justify their pathologos, and lacking specifically the cause of that is lacking what Socrates is passing on, lacking the reasoning, the artful use of logos and being the way Socrates is artfully using it, and we can call that the art of the logos. So the cause is the lack of the art of the logos. So how do we address it? Lie about it like mainstream networks do because they benefit from the continual use of this lie to enslave and act out tyranny? No. I don't lie about it. Oh, but I feel bad. Doesn't matter. You don't have to feel bad. We can change things. Don't lie about it. Just like we're not lying about the misteaching of philosophy by experts. That's why we don't lie about the past translations of this text being bad. We tell the truth. So what? We just knock down the statues? No. We also erect new statues. So the tearing down of the statues of these fascists and horrible human beings who thought in this way and acted in this way. Sure, but you have to replace it with the truth. Put a Socrates statue up everywhere. Why? To remind us of the paradigm of true excellence, of true justice, of what we should be here, what we are here to learn. Not how to talk our way around by being a like the Wolf of Wall Street guy, how to lie to people for your own interest, like a politician or a businessman or like you name it. Those who have authority are lovers of contention or controversialists. The ones who lack logos being an art. No, we have to remind us that we can address it. We can understand the causes, and that's what we're doing here. So this is what's behind, or the meaning or the implications of this unknown person. Hey, what about the physical world? Shouldn't that dictate things? No. In fact, we are specifically looking for a higher level of causes, and the outline that Socrates gave us was, number one, allow the real beings to exist. That's the first step. You can't even play unless you allow that to be. And then you use a hypothesis, you push the implications, you use the loftiest vision, you see if the consequences are harmonious or in discord, and then you create new hypothesis. So that's what we've been doing. We've created a SAC, a hypothesis SAC, an if SAC. That's part of being on the quest of philosophy. Develop questions to create hypotheses about, look for key terms, arrange them, develop the dialectic to test the consequences of them. So that's what we've been doing all the way along. And also recognizing the unfolding nature of the logos, causally unfolds according to cause, and the return through causes, to specifically recognize, hey, right at the start, pleasure and pain come from their opposites in the physical world, but Aesop, if he was to mythologize how God made this, he would give them the same head. So where is that head? It can't be in the world of becoming, it has to be in the realm of being. And that's what we're talking about, self-ousia, and the hyparxis of our soul, where our soul really lives. Problem with my shoulder today, I don't know why. Okay. Not at this moment, this argument doesn't disturb me, but these objections have disturbed me. And it disturbs me every time I look to a racist or a Republican or a Jordan Peterson type or a right-wing red pill type, and they use this kind of reasoning. Hey, look at the strongest apes win, so all the power and money should go to the strongest apes in humanity, because we're just like apes. This way of thinking, looking at the logos of opposites of the physical world to try and justify their injustice, but not realizing their own injustice isn't based on an opposite, it's based on their shadow of the art of the logos. So not really motivating by that, which is why they're hypocrites, why they get caught in a lie. They'll say, hey, you can't, I'm all about freedom of speech, unless you're speaking up against my personal opinions. So you weren't about freedom of speech. In other words, the principles that you're using to justify what you're doing are not actually what you're trying to do. In other words, your hypothesis is, if you push the implications or consequences, they are discordant with one another. Yeah, like all right-wing fascist propaganda is discordant with each other. But that's not to say the progressives aren't, because they're not to the same extent, but they are still within the confines of capitalism and what follows without an art of the logos. So they are corrupt and part of the corrupt system and part of the corrupt charade of illusion of choice and that kind of thing. So, but now we can get the art of the logos to point out, hey, this is why. We can understand what you're doing, and we can hold you to a standard of art. So there's no talking about politics and religion at the dinner table is only because we don't think there's a way of resolving these questions, because we don't recognize there is an art. Because what's the cause of that? Because we did not pick up the logos of Socrates. We didn't pick up what he left for us to pick up, but we can now in this channel by reading this text together. Socrates. Then we are altogether agreed about this, that the opposite will absolutely in no way whatsoever come to be opposite to itself. Doesn't happen with the things themselves. consider if you will also agree with me on that which still follows. So pushing the implications. We've come to a hypothesis. This is the cause of the way things are. Now let's push the implications. See if this is what follows. With what he said to do, right? He said, come up with your greatest hypothesis using your loftiest vision. And then examine the consequences that follow. So what we're doing here. So we're demonstrating what we're defining in a sense. So, okay. That which still follows. So, see if you agree on that which follows. Is there something you call hot and cold? Why, of course I do. Are there then just as ice and fire? By Zeus, not to me indeed, are they like ice and fire? Since heat is something different than fire, and cold is something other than ice. Now it's the same words. And so the question is it same or other? Sorry, is it different or other? The word is heteron. And heteron means in Greek I think other. Looking at the lexicon here. Heteros, one or the other of two, other. But it does throw in different too. Okay, there's a question about one, there's a question in the Greek between other and different because they are similar, but used in slightly different ways metaphysically. So heteron, yeah, I think it's other because it's defined in relation to other than the good. Yeah, other. So heteron seems to be other. There might be a different word for different, and we might have gone through this in the first hypothesis, but it's not bad to remind ourselves. Other of the two. So heteron seems to be other. So the word is other. So let's cross out different. So heat is something other than fire. Right, that makes more sense because I think different might be on the commensurate level. Like a milliliter is different from, or 2 liters is different from 1 liter, but miles is other than liters. Or 2 liters is other than a mile. I think. I'm not sure. It's a hypothesis. So it goes in, it's a likely hypothesis using my loftiest vision that I'm taking with me to see if it pans out or not. This is the way of thinking Socrates is suggesting we do. The heat is something other than fire, and the cold is something other than ice. Yes. But I suppose that it appears to you that the following is indeed the case, that ice will in no way be receptive of the heat, just as we said before, and still remain being that which it is, and be both ice and hot. But at the approach of heat, self will either withdraw or be destroyed. Okay? Can't be both ice and hot. Withdraw or be destroyed. By all means. And indeed, fire, in turn, at the approach of the cold, self will either go away or be destroyed. Fire will go somewhere else. Since it will never dare accept the coldness and still be just as it was, fire. What you say is true. Accordingly, and then, maybe just then, in some cases, that not only is the ideal self always throughout all time, here we go. So we're after the idea that the soul is immortal and indestructible. So always and throughout all time, an idea of eternity or immortality, worthy of the name of self. But there is also something else which, if is not that, but, okay, there's something else which is not that, but always maintains the form of that, wherever it exists. Okay, there's a certain idea. There's a certain idea or ousia, aspect of ousia, eidos, which means ideal, I guess, but ideal specifically meaning an aspect of the self-ousia that exists all throughout time, worthy of the name, and maintaining the form of that wherever it exists. But perhaps I can make my meaning still clearer in this way. For certainly the odd must always necessarily have this name, which we now mention, odd. Right? Is that not the case? Well, it certainly is. Odd will always be called odd. Then, odd is the only self among the real beings. Interesting. For this is what I mean. Is there also something else which is not just as the odd, but it is equally necessary to always call this self this also, along with the name of itself, because it is of such a nature, and so to never be separated from the odd. Heck does that mean?
What in the heck are we talking about here?
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense. Come on, man.
Let's try that again. Okay, so there's this idea of odd that exists among the real beings. And there is something else which has the name of odd along with the name of itself. Okay? Like, I guess 3. 3 has the name 3, but also... So 3 has the name of 3, but also has the name odd. Let's see if... Let's keep reading. So it's never separated from the odd because of its nature. Thus I mean the self-triad. There we go. Which happens to be one example, but there are many more. Okay, nice pick. Consider then the case of the triad. Remember our triads we've been developing? Got lots. Does it not accordingly appear to you that it is always called both the name of self, triad, and that of the odd, which is not the very same as the triad? 3 ain't odd, but we say 3 is 3 and odd. Here's a triad. Given by the author, not in the text, but let's have a look at it anyway. Okay, he's adding something that's not there yet, the whole of number, but let's keep moving. But it has nevertheless somehow thus brought forth 3 and 5 and half of the whole of number. Interesting. So the whole of number is even. So, oh no. Half of the whole of number. All of the numbers that exist are either odd or even. Half of them are going to be odd, half of them are going to be even. Okay. So as not to be that which is just as the odd, yet each one of selves are always odd. Okay. So 3, 5, keep going for every second number. They will all be odd. They are always odd. But they're not the same as oddness itself. So they have it as a quality. An adjective, you could say. Partaking in the idea of oddness. And in turn, those that are 2 and 4 and the whole other row of numbers, while not being that which is just as the even, and yet each one of the selves are nevertheless always even. Would you agree or not? Would you? We would say, yes. Yes, 4 is always even. So is 6. And 2. How could I not agree, says CB. Now then, observe that which I desire to make clear. Therefore, this is the case, that it has come to light that not only do these opposites not accept each other, but also as many of those beings that while they are not opposite to each other, 3 and 4, yet they also always possess the opposites. And it is reasonable that these in no way accept the idea whose ousia is opposite to that which is in selves, since when it approaches self, will surely either perish or withdraw. Shall we not say that those that are 3 will either abandon or comply to anything whatsoever before becoming even, and still remain being 3? Now let's break that down a little bit. Okay, 2 and 3 are not opposites to each other. You can't say the opposite of 2 is 3. And equally so, you can't use it to say, oh, 2 comes from 3 and 3 comes from 2, because they're opposites. The same way the bear becomes hungry and full, and then hungry again, and then full again. But even and odd are opposite to each other. But if something is 3, it can't keep the idea of odd, it can't partake in the idea of odd at the same time as its opposites. It has to withdraw. If you add coldness to fire, it becomes less fire. It withdraws and withdraws, or maybe completely extinguishes. Likewise, if you add heat to ice, it will withdraw and perish, which is interesting because now we're kind of getting an understanding of why things are the way they are, because the world of becoming is generation and decay. Things are coming to being. We want to know how we can do that because we want to become into being the ideal self. We want to have our excellence, reach our destiny, but we also don't want to decay. We don't want to get cancer. We don't want to die. Well, before our we want to die the philosophical way, of course, but we don't want to get sick and die before our time. So he's saying, hey, it's to do with how much we're partaking in the thing or its opposite. How much are we partaking in the ideal or the opposite? And you can't be human and partake in whatever is the opposite of that. Of generation, let's say, if there's an idea of generation. You have to have, so let's use this example. You can't stay 3 and partake of the idea of even. 3 will do anything before becoming even. It will run away, it will do backflips, it will jump into other equations. It can't accept being even while still remaining 3, but it can partake in the idea of odd. So there isn't that back and forth of opposites that we see in the realm of becoming, in the realm of being. The thing runs away, they don't come from each other, and likewise our participation doesn't come from each other. Therefore, if we want to make something good, we don't introduce that which is bad. Punishment, suffering, torture, genocide, prison, fines, admonishment. Because the good doesn't come out of the bad. You can't be good and accept the idea of its opposite. You'll run away. This is why rewards and punishments are stupid. Particularly punishments. Well, rewards are similar. Rewards for a different reason. You have to introduce the art of the logos to make things better. And the injustice within the soul can't partake in the opposite, the shadow, injustice, as well as the justice of the art, or the lack of art, ignorance, and the art. One will have to withdraw, the injustice will have to withdraw, or ultimately perish, or rather be purified. Different way of looking at learning and development. But we can also see why people miss the mark. If they think, oh, things come from its opposites, I make you good by introducing the bad, you can only really be happy if you know suffering. So I'm actually going to be one of those supervillains that say, oh yes, you need the bad, you need inequality. How can we enjoy being rich unless there's a lot of poverty? How can we enjoy being full if we're not starving? How will we be motivated if we're not being manipulated through capitalism, through the threat of poverty or starvation? We have to introduce the bad. Hey, how can we make America great unless we constantly keep people in the negative? Fear, ignorance, stress, anxiety. The good comes from the bad, right? Wrong. The opposite. The goodness in people can't sustain introducing the badness in principle. It will abandon or withdraw or destroy it, or perish or withdraw. The same way another dialogue says, is a horse made better by hitting it? No. Is it through the introducing the excellence of the horse that a horse is made better? Yes. You don't hit your dogs to make them better. You don't hit kids to make them better. You never did, even if it was a different time. Bullshit. It was never good then. Like, oh, I'm made better by introducing the worst because it's a different time. Columbus. Oh yeah, we genocided these Native Americans and enslaved the African Americans because it makes them better somehow. Bollocks. It's a lie to justify injustice. And the reason why they're pursuing injustice is because they mistake it for justice. The shadow of justice. Otherwise, why would they seek it if they didn't believe it to be good? Socrates is really laying out for us an understanding of why things are the way they are, lack of the art of logos, and what is needed to introduce to make them better. And it's not the opposite. Surely then, the dyad is not the opposite of the triad. Indeed, it is not. Therefore, not only do opposite ideas not sustain the approach of each other, but also some other beings do not sustain or approach the opposites, sustain the approach of the opposites. That's what we just said. The three, not only does the even not accept odd, but three doesn't accept it. Similarly, you can't justify making the world better by killing 1 million people. The ends justify the means. No, you can't. It doesn't work that way. Justice makes things just. Justice can't come, is it Dostoevsky, even at the cost of a single tear from an innocent child. That's not a just world. That's not making things just. Punishment, enslavement, war, oppression, starvation, genocide, all these things, exploitation, capitalism, fascism, lying through the media, profiteering. All of these things are unjust, and they're only justified by this kind of argument. Oh no, it's a little injustice, but that's the way the world is, or it will be good overall, or it's a net gain, that kind of crap. It doesn't make sense. One, because in the realm of ideas that we seek, Justice can't tolerate injustice. It won't fit. Odd can't be even. But also those beings, those other beings like us in the physical world of becoming also do not sustain the approach of the others. No joke, the more you abuse a child, the more sad and unjust they become. Just, I'm teaching you a lesson, bollocks, that justifies oppression and violence through the idea of punishment doesn't make sense. It is irrational and unjust. It is anti-logos. So what do? Punish those people who like punishment? Blow up all the warmongers? Steal all the wealth from the profiteers? No, that's the same issue. Introducing injustice to address the injustice, that's going to push the good out of their souls more. So what do? Introduce justice. Introduce true learning. Introduce true healing. In one word, introduce the art of the logos. That's what we need to do. Always. Why? Because you can't sustain the opposites, and that means if we're introducing what's good, the art of the logos, then that which is the opposite, the injustice, the tyranny, all of the division and war cannot sustain. It will withdraw It will withdraw or perish or withdraw, and that's what we want to do. Perish or withdraw injustice, inequality, suffering, you name it, everything that we've mentioned today. And how do we do it? By introducing the opposite. By blowing up the warmongers? No. By introducing a new religion to counteract the bad religions? No. Belief against belief? No, we're looking for the unopinable. Creating a new hierarchy where your race is on top? No. Why? Because not only do the opposite ideas not sustain the approach of each other, but also some other beings do not approach their opposites. Get rid of the some. The other beings do not sustain the approach of the opposites. There we go. Socrates is laying down not only how we can think, but the consequences that follow this way of thinking. So we're using it to understand how we can act in the world. How do we solve problems? All problems. Okay, rejecting the unjust strategies, but introducing that which is good, because the other beings do not approach the opposites. But also within our soul, we want to reach the ideal for ourselves. We want knowledge and phronesis. Therefore, we need to not be the opposite of that. In other words, don't seek physical pleasures sometimes and then the art of the logos. That's not the virtue of sound-mindedness. It's through likeness. The law says the pure, as was mentioned earlier, Socrates says the law says only the pure may enter the pure, or be with the join with the pure. So it's through likeness of the idea. Likeness of what? Likeness of the being. Which is what? Which is a way of partaking in the idea, partaking in the thing. So if the art of the logos is the way in which we as the other beings can partake in the idea of the logos in being, then that's what we should be doing at all times. Again, so simple, one solution. Isn't that interesting? And of course it is. Now, there's an artful use of that one solution. In other words, you need to understand the art of the logos in your experience of being and learn this art of the logos, the understanding of it, the dialectic and the logos, so you can use it artfully. But that's what we're after. Okay? So, and within our soul, hey, I'm beating myself up. Okay? Well, maybe I should give it a taste of its own medicine and beat up that guy that beats me up. No. I'll use its own logic against it. No. Why? Because you're introducing the opposite of that which you want. So for our souls and for the world, we need to better understand this art of the logos, because that's what Socrates is saying we need to do. Okay, so this introduction of opposites and understanding is through participation in the ideas, that things get their names. That also has to tie in with what he started with, this way of thinking, which is what? To realize it's not through physical things like brightness or color or shape that things have what they are. Okay, that's the same thing. That's this self-usia. But also, how do we think? How do we reason? Create hypotheses based on your loftiest ideas and understanding. The loftiest level, again, what level are you up the logos? Which we can now understand is the art. How far is your understanding and experience of the art of the logos? Use that to develop a hypothesis. Don't get distracted. Don't mix the dry and the wet. Follow causes. Follow the consequences that follow. So there has to be a definition of your hypothesis. There has to be a demonstration and division. The consequences that follow, are they concordant or discordant? Does that come to light as being best? If not, hypothesize another one in turn. Keep a sack of hypotheses going as you go, and that is your way of finding the cause and reaching real beings. So this activity somehow must be how we are partaking in the idea of the logos, because Socrates is saying it's by partaking in the idea in self-usia that good things become good, and that bad things will withdraw or perish, which is what we want. What's that called? Purification. So if Socrates is saying, hey, it's by introducing the good that you purify, make, withdraw, or perish that which is bad, which we need to do to reach the realm of being through the art of the logos. And equally so, it's through partaking in that we are made more good than we were yesterday or than another person. It's by partaking in the idea of greatness more than Simmias. Is Phaedo taller than Simmias? No, he's taller than Socrates. So by introducing the idea of the good, we purify the bad, and by partaking in that idea more, we are made more good or more taller. Therefore, if this is what Socrates is saying we need to introduce in our way of thinking, somehow this activity, this way of reasoning, is somehow partaking more in the idea of the art of the logos, that which is the art of the good and the recognition of the bad, that which can purify and perfect, that which can make us most good. For our souls, in the time that we have here, while we're on earth, there is a time period which we can learn. Spend that time learning, as much time as you have. Don't be distracted and mix the dry with the wet, as controversialists do. Don't get distracted. Don't waste your time here, because you're going to somewhere beyond time, maybe in this life too. This is the kind of purification and perfection that you need to do. This. Why? Because you're purifying the bad, because it can't sustain that idea, and you're perfecting yourself. So do this at all times, Socrates is encouraging us to do, while we have time here. Why? Because we are certain kind of beings. Where are we? We are a certain kind of beings that can partake in the ideas while we're here. For our souls, and as a secondary byproduct to help humanity. Win-win. So, we want to see more of what follows of this reasoning, and we are seeing in this reasoning what happens if it is purification, perfection, or what happens if it isn't. the kind of reason that's always used to justify playing out the shadow. Oh, it's the logos of the physical world. It's lobsters, it's hierarchies, it's the law of nature, it's survival of the fittest, it's sexual selection. All of this bollocks, not realizing that, hey, you're looking at the physical back and forth of opposites of the world of becoming as a way of justifying the shadow of the art of the logos, which is the actual injustice. And the only way you improve yourself is to introduce the true idea, which is the art of the logos, which is what we're doing, what we need to continue to do. And hopefully what we'll nail down even more next time. So on that cliffhanger, on that bombshell, I really hope to see you next time. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to support, you can do so on Patreon, or there's donations somewhere. On Twitch, there's a donation thing to help support the channel. You can watch along in real time, like our friends have been doing today on Twitch. So Awakening Philosophy, there's a link below. If you want to follow in real time on Twitch, you can subscribe to the YouTube channels, and you can find the text that we're reading below for free. So, exciting stuff. What are you going to do with the rest of your day? Introduce the good? The art of the logos? Sometimes or all the time? You can introduce some fire and then some cold? What's that going to do to the ice of your soul? Push the implications. Try it out. See if it works. If it doesn't, try a better hypothesis. Use your loftiest vision to create another hypothesis. Try it out. Be this way. Be the art of the logos. The logos of the self. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time.